Hey clarifilettes and clariphiles across the fruited plain and elsewhere across this little speck of dust floating around in God knows what. Are you frustrated and confused about the claims and counterclaims of the various mouthpiece makers about their mouthpieces, and also dazzled by the high prices, thinking that maybe price may equate value? Well, if all these things have you perplexed, I think I have some things that will unperplex you, unconfuse you, and help you make a good, intelligent decision about which mouthpiece you should be playing and why. If you're interested, stay tuned. If you've been following this video blog for any length of time, you may have run into one video or two or more about me talking about the nature of the musical sound phrase. The musical sound phrase is made up of pitch, color, and shape. These three elements represent what you might call the interior or internal aspects of the musical tone. Now, externally, there is the question of dynamics, playing loud and soft, and its effect on the stability of pitch, color, and shape. So we all know that when we change dynamic levels, that pitch, color, and shape tend to change. So the idea with the clarinet is to keep them consistent as much as possible. And if you vary them, then you vary them on purpose, not because the clarinets become out of control. So pitch, color, and shape internally. Externally, you have the question of stability in pitch, color, and shape in dynamic changes. You also have what you feel behind your nose, which is response and resistance. Those are two more things. So that pretty much quantifies the musical sound phrase: pitch, color, shape, stability, and response and resistance. Now, every aspect of clarinet equipment outside your nose, the mouthpiece, barrel, and the rest of the clarinet bell, all these things, when you change them, they have an effect to a greater or lesser degree on all these aspects of the musical sound phrase. And probably no other part of equipment has much more influence over these things than the mouthpiece. Maybe the reed does, actually, ironically. But the mouthpiece is very important. And once you understand how each part of the mouthpiece relates to these elements of musical sound phrase, intrinsic and extrinsic elements, and a question of stability, response, then you will understand how to better make intelligent judgments about what mouthpiece you should be playing and why. And we're going to look at the clarinet mouthpiece in the light of these elements: pitch, color, and shape, the intrinsic elements; dynamic, the extrinsic force operating on dynamics and its influence on stability; and then the question of response and resistance. And that's what's going to follow. So let's begin and look at each element of the mouthpiece and see exactly how it influences pitch, color, and shape, and all the rest of the stuff. Before we talk about the specifics of the mouthpiece, we should know the names of the specifics, so when I talk about one of them, you'll know which one it is. So let's take a look at the mouthpiece here. You can see the mouthpiece is made up, of course, of a barrel or an outside of the mouthpiece, and that terminates in the beak slope. And then when you look at the facing, you see the facing has various parts. It has a left rail, a right side rail, and then a tip rail, and then it has a reed table. The interior of the mouthpiece is made up of a chamber and a bore. The chamber has three parts. It has two side walls that form the venturi, and it has a baffle. And the baffle leads into the bore of the mouthpiece. On the outside, besides the beak contour, besides the beak slope, there is the question of the beak contour, which is something I hear very little about. but it's something seriously to consider on the mouthpiece. So those are the parts of the mouthpiece we're going to be talking about and their names. So now let's proceed to talk about the first musical element and what parts of the mouthpiece affect it most. And that first musical element is pitch. When I was going to Yale, one of my big treats was hearing Harold Wright play. And one time, the Boston Symphony that he was playing in came down to Yale and gave a wonderful concert. I ran backstage and I cornered Mr. Wright, and I asked him, "Mr. Wright, what do you always look for in a mouthpiece? What's the first thing you look for?" And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Pitch." And I said, "Pitch?" I was thinking, isn't it beautiful resonant tone or flexibility or response? Or no, it was pitch. Pitch was the most important thing to him. And my own experience, years and years of experience after that, has borne that out as a truth. In fact, a lot of problems can come in selecting a mouthpiece without checking the pitch level. Mouthpieces can vary in pitch level as much as 25 or 30 cents, even within the same manufacturer. For instance, the standard Van Doren will play 20 to 25 cents higher and even more than one of their M13 models or M15 models, which has a larger bore and a larger chamber and a deeper baffle. So those things really, really need to be checked. Now, you can measure mouthpiece lengths. Mouthpiece lengths will vary from, say, 88 millimeters to 89, maybe 90 millimeters, 91 at the most. But the length of the mouthpiece, like I'm measuring it here, but the length of the mouthpiece is not the whole story. The whole story on pitch is total volume inside. Length contributes to the total volume of the mouthpiece, but it's not the sole thing. The depth of the baffle, the width of the side rails, and the taper of the bore and how large it is will mostly determine what pitch level the mouthpiece is going to play at. And you can also measure the bores, but the most important thing is that you're aware of this when you're trying mouthpieces and you test the mouthpieces rigorously to see how well they tune. If they're very high-pitched mouthpieces, they're going to make your throat tones high and your clarinet generally high overall. You'll probably end up having to pull your barrel quite a bit in order to get down to pitch. If they're very low-pitched mouthpieces, you may have trouble with throat tones playing in tune because they'll tend to sag flat. And you may even have to go to shorter barrels. So pitch is one of the most important things. That, like I said, there are technical checks for it, but there's nothing like proofing the pudding than tasting it. And you've just got to play the mouthpiece and check for that. Don't just check for how free it blows and how beautiful the tone is and how good the response is. Just all those things will be important to you, but what do they matter if you can't play up to pitch? What will they matter if you can't play the mouthpiece in tune with your clarinet? So that's a major consideration. It's the first thing we're talking about here because everything else follows from having a mouthpiece that will play well in tune for you.